The PlayStation 4 Pro. What the hell? What's up guys, Max here, and I wanted to make this video before it gets any later because I'm sure a lot of you are at home wondering if you should be getting the PlayStation 4 Pro. Should you be trading in your existing console for store and credit, leaving you with just a PS4 Pro and not an older system? I've had quite a bit that's happened to me over the past few days of trying to get this thing to work, as well as getting it to work eventually, and I would like to tell you about that. I was initially excited for the PS4 Pro, not specifically for the 4K output, but more so the better functionality for games I already have, if not some coming out in the future. Specifically 1080p, higher definition like downsampling from 4K, games running at 60 frames per second in 1080p, this stuff had me excited, and there's a few games in the future that have me really excited, including Final Fantasy 15, Resident Evil 7 VR, and Neo coming out early next year. Now, I was excited for all of this. The PS4 Pro looked to be pretty good, but I did make a video cautiously advising you guys that if you're looking for fighting games, well, there is currently no fighting games that the PS4 Pro upgrades, except BlazBlue, a very small amount. But I've gone through absolute hell and high water getting this thing to function over the first 24 hours, and then eventually within 3 days finally getting it to work. And I would like to tell you why. The PS4 Pro has a tough time with 4K 60Hz inputs on some televisions. I'm a big fan of the PlayStation 4 console. I don't want to make it seem like I'm totally harking on Sony right now, but the PS4 has really given me no issues. I love its UI, I love its interface way more than the Xbox One. PS4 Pro, and to some extent the PSVR, have given me nothing but issues, and then I've eventually gotten them to work through some means, but it's been kind of annoying. With the PS4 Pro, I have this D-Series Vizio TV that you guys will see on screen right now. The reason I got this TV specifically was for fighting games and the response rate of regular games. When it runs on the 4K slot, the 4K HDMI port, which is HDMI port 5, this thing outputs only 1 frame of delay, meaning that for its size, which is 50 inches, it's got the least amount of input delay of almost any TV on the market right now for its specific size, which is great, and which is the reason why I got it. It's also extremely highly rated and costs just about as much as all the other 4K TVs that people are recommending for the PS4 Pro. But a ton of people are running into issues with their Vizios, with their LGs, and to an extent, with their Sony televisions as well, because the PS4 Pro just outputs a black screen signal. There's like nothing there, even though it's registering something, nothing is showing up. Now, I don't normally have a problem with 4K on this TV in any way. My computer runs games in 4K just fine. I have a 4K monitor on this end, and when I've plugged it in on the other side to run a game in 4K, it works just great, and I've run into zero issues. But with the PS4 Pro, I could not get a signal to show up. I even did this specific method. I'll also link it down below if you guys want to try it. This is what they recommend for Vizio users: to go into safe mode, change the HDCP setting from automatic to 1.4, and then restart it and change your resolution back to 1080. But even upon doing this, it didn't work. When you go into safe mode on the PS4 Pro, it goes into like 480p and that signal comes up just fine. But I couldn't even get a 1080p signal, much less a 4K signal to show up on this thing after the patch. Now, what I'm talking about is a patch that messed everything up. When you initially plug in your PlayStation 4 Pro, when I plugged it into that slot, it worked just fine. It brought up, but it immediately told me you need to download a patch. And this patch is what messed everything up. There is another patch that came out today for the PlayStation 4 Pro, but it does not address any of these issues, and people are still having the same troubles. This patch messed a ton of things up in terms of the HDCP handshake, or an HDMI handshake. It has to make with your television, your HDMI cable, and the system that it's communicating with. It has to make like an agreement of sending signal. And for some reason, the PS4 Pro, and to some lesser extent the PSVR, has a tough time with this. In order to get the PSVR working before, I had to directly plug this thing into a capture device, output the capture device, and plug it into a TV, and that was fine. But if you're a video guy and you're splitting signals and you're using a splitter here and there, it's tough because it didn't work with splitters at all. I had to take that stuff completely out of the equation, which was frustrating to say the least. Nonetheless, my PS4 Pro at this point wasn't working in 4K, it wasn't working in 1080p, and the only way I can get a signal to show up on this freaking TV was by going into safe mode, and then the 480p signal would show up just fine. But as soon as I changed it to 1080p or 4K, I couldn't get a signal at all. This was taking out splitters, this was taking out capture devices as well. So what the hell was going on? Let me tell you my solution. If you guys are out there and you've already tried this one process that Vizio users have done in order to go into safe mode, that's awesome. I'm glad it's working for you, but for many others, we are suffering pretty hard, and there's a few forum threads I'll post in the link below that's talking about progress or what people have figured out in terms of getting this thing fixed. So, what I did was, to circumvent this issue on my TV, I plugged in my PSVR to the PS4 Pro, which I normally did not have. Through the process of just taking the HDMI cable and doing a pass-through through a PSVR and then going into a capture device or my TV through the exact same slot it was having issues with, it runs fine. I don't know exactly what's going on, but for some reason these systems make ridiculous HDCP handshakes, and it's very obvious that it was not properly tested with a ton of different displays and monitors. It came out too quick and really needs to be fixed as soon as possible in a patch from Sony, because it worked at one point at launch before the patch that we were forced upon when the system came out. The other problem was that my PSVR doesn't work with splitters, so that allows me to only plug directly into a capture device and then output a capture device into the TV, which is okay. I mean, it's good for streaming, but I essentially have to unplug the thing from my capture device and replug it back into everything else that runs just fine with splitters and other capture devices and everything. The only thing between every single signal I've tried to capture over HDMI, from a very low signals at 240 and 480p to very high signals at 4K and 1080, the PS4 Pro is the only system that has really given me issues, and to a lesser extent the PSVR. So to get to where I was right now, we're pass-throughing the HDMI through the PSVR and going into the TV. But I want to use splitters really bad. I want to be able to split this signal and capture it on multiple fronts. The other answer at this point was to use something called a FrameMeister. This is an upscaler box that's best used for older systems and multiple inputs, and it's really good for classic gaming. Now, at the end of this whole process, I did get this thing working at my desired signal, which is 1080p on the 4K 60Hz slot of HDMI on my TV. It eventually does work because I take the HDMI cable from my PS4 Pro, go into the PSVR, output that cable into my FrameMeister, and then that cable outputs into multiple splitters which go to all my capture devices, my streaming, my recording setup, and guess what? It worked just fine. So by the process of pass-throughing this thing through a PSVR and then pass-throughing it again through a FrameMeister, it did something to the HDCP of the signal that removed the handshake that was messing everything up from the system initially. What the hell? This overall process, if we count all the equipment, including the PS4 Pro, costs around $1,300.
$1,300.
That's the PS4 Pro, the PSVR, and the FrameMeister. It costs $1,300 technically to get the PS4 Pro to show up on my 4K TV that runs everything else just great. This is why you should most likely wait to buy a PS4 Pro right now. There are patches coming out for the system. There was one that just came out, but like most people are saying, they're still experiencing the same thing, a black screen, no signal. They have to fix it by going into safe mode, and even that doesn't work sometimes. It is ridiculous. Easily one of the most frustrating situations I've ever had with a launch console ever. And I don't recommend anyone else go through with it, because if you trade in your system and then come home with just the PS4 Pro, try plugging it into your TV, even if it's just 1080p, it might not work. Not to mention that it might make your older games look worse, which is happening a lot all over the place right now. I'm recommending to you guys right now, as a person that spent a lot of money on this system and I had high hopes at launch, this thing is currently messed up, and it will get better. I'm sure Sony is going to fix it because this is the current flagship hardware of the company right now, but good lord did they need to fix it freaking fast. I eventually got it to work. I hope you guys don't have any issues at all, but as many have told me on Twitter and several other places in terms of my stream and all the different forum posts I found on the Sony forums, as well as stuff on NeoGAF and other places of people trying to figure out what the hell they're supposed to do, this was a long, arduous, and frustrating process. I have good hopes for the PS4 Pro in the future. Developers are promising some amazing things. I want to play these games in the best way possible because they are console exclusive right now. But man, am I glad that I have a computer that runs everything really good. I'm not too interested in the Project Scorpio because I have a GTX 1080 and a good i7 processor in my computer that's going to kick the crap out of a bunch of games, making the Project Scorpio next box really not that useful for me in any way at all. Best of luck to you guys. That's my word of warning to anyone that's buying a PlayStation 4 Pro. I'm sure it sounded confusing. It was extremely confusing and extremely frustrating for me in the days figuring it out. But at least now that we have it figured out, we'll get some PSVR games running a lot better than they did initially, which was very rough. And those future games that I'm very much looking forward to, including Final Fantasy 15, Resident Evil 7 VR, as well as Neo. I cannot wait to play these games with the best visuals possible, especially a better frame rate, because that is always the most important. As always, dudes, thank you a ton for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back with more information about the PS4 Pro, as well as the games played on it. My name is Max, and I'll see you next time.